come up on your screen. Is it okay for us to do the recording? And if you can say yes to that, that would be fantastic. So what I will do is I'll probably pause my video now in a second because it's really more about the product than it's about me. So hopefully everybody has got a chance to see that we've started. So let me just...
Hi Mark, it's Vesco here. I can't see anything, neither sharing of any screen, neither a presentation or any images.
Oh, you're not seeing anything at the moment, Vesco, is that right?
Okay.
Okay, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'm going to end my video and share my desktop, and hopefully you should see my desktop at that stage.
But there's an error message saying that the functions of are not available because of technical issues. That's what Lync says here online.
Okay, so if you're getting that at your end, with two options. One, we can just go with the audio for you, or you can restart your machine and try Lync again. What I will do, Vesco, is it is a pilot, but what I will do is we're going to record everything. I'll do the audio, and if you can bear with us and see how we get on. But if you want to restart and stay on the phone, if you know what I mean, and see if that lets you.
I'll do that.
Perfect. Listen, thank you very much. Martin, thanks for joining us. I think you're online as well, is that right? Hello, Martin. The Ireland jury, or the Irish jury calling the Amsterdam jury. Okay, I'm going to assume that we're okay to go, guys. We might get a few little teething issues. Do remember that you can connect to the audio with voice over IP, or you can connect using the conference bridge. So if your audio is not working on Lync at any stage, don't be afraid to dial in from the email that gives you your local conference number. But I'm going to fire ahead because I think we have everybody going. So what I want to do, I'm going to share my desktop, and we'll start off with our favorite, which is PowerPoint. I know how much we all love PowerPoint. Okay, so for the moment I'm going to I'll pause the video. I don't think we need the video anymore. Okay. Can I talk a little bit louder? I've never been asked to talk louder, but I will try that and see. And what I want to do is I want to check, hopefully, that everybody can see my desktop, and you should be seeing the Windows Small Business Server 2011 screen, and hopefully that's okay for everybody. So I want to kick off, and I want to look at the course objectives for everybody. So what I'm really saying here, guys, is at the end of the course, we should be comfortable with SBS Essentials versus Standard. Is that okay? We should be able to look at the differences between those two. I want to really explode any of the myths against SBS, because I'm sure some of us have preconceptions around SBS, and I want to explode that. But I also want to look at, which is quite important, when is SBS not enough? Is that okay? And I think a lot of us are going to be anxious on that. The other thing is, some of us on the call, or even here, may not be particularly SBS focused, but where I want to go is I want to talk about cloud with SBS, but I also want to show you how we can counter cloud with on-premise solutions. Would you agree with me to a certain extent that on-premise is a better, well, it fits better what we're trying to do at the moment versus cloud? Because we're trying to sell storage, we're trying to sell hardware, etc. So hopefully there should be something in all of this. I agree everyone here knows quite a bit about SBS, so let's try and make it a little bit different. So hopefully everybody across Europe can hear me okay as well, so that's fine. I think I'm going to have to get a new webcam, so I'm not bending over the webcam, but we'll worry about that later. So I want to talk about Essentials versus SBS 2011. And I suppose we have SBS 2011 Essentials and we have SBS 2011 Standard. So let me ask a question. I'm going to ask a question of my audience here. What's the difference between Essentials and Standard? So the amount of users is definitely the first difference. How many users can we handle with SBS Essentials? In other words, what's the maximum number of users? 25 is the maximum number of users. Next question, which I think is an obvious one, and I suppose the next one for me would be, how do we buy SBS Essentials CALs? And that's the point. There isn't any CALs. In other words, SBS Essentials out of the box is 25 users, job done. We're finished. Is that okay? Now, I suppose when we talk about CALs, one of the interesting things for me is if I have a user using a Nokia phone, using POP3 to connect to the Exchange server, does he need a CAL? Absolutely. Because he is using the Exchange server. I don't care if he's using POP3 or if he's using IMAP or if he's using anything else. He has to have a CAL if he's accessing the mail server. Is that okay?
Yep.
So the big thing for me is, obviously in an essential situation, we can handle up to 25 of those users and we're done. The question we often get asked is there an upgrade path from essentials to standard? And there isn't.
The question, a mobile user, would that be a dual CAL because he's using Exchange on his phone and on the computer, or is there still one CAL as long as there's just one mail address?
So for everyone in here as well, the question was, and it's a very good question, thanks very much for that, if someone's a mobile user, will they need two CALs, one for their laptop or their mobile device and one for their desktop? And the answer is no, because generally speaking, we license per user and not per device. Absolutely, if you license per device, and that's all you were licensing for, if we were talking about SBS standard, you would need two CALs for that user. It doesn't apply in Essentials because we treat the CALs as per user, and there is no purchase of CALs. So, great question. Short answer is 9 times out of 10 we're going to license SBS with per user. From that point of view, we shouldn't have to worry. That should be okay for everybody, I think. The next thing for me, I suppose, is if we talk about standard versus essentials, what's another difference? Well, the big question, I suppose, is what's included in essentials? Or more to the point, what's not included in essentials? And I think most of us know this. SBS 2011 Essentials is effectively Windows 2008 or 2 standard. What's the maximum amount of memory that Essentials can handle? 32 gigs because it's built on standard, as in Windows standard. What's the maximum amount of memory that Windows SBS 2011 standard can handle? 32 gigs because it's built on standard. Is that okay, guys? So where I'm going with this is, if we talk about Essentials, what's included with Essentials? It's basically a Windows 2008 or 2 server with Active Directory and very little else. Is that okay? So what's not in it? Exchange is not there. SharePoint is not included. Now, a good question that we got asked before was, with terminal services, or obviously remote desktop services, can we use remote desktop services with any version of SBS? Let me throw that out to the audience online. Can we use remote desktop services on SBS Standard or SBS Essentials?
Yeah, a separate server. Right.
So the separate server, you're dead right, has to be there. The short answer is I cannot install terminal services, aka remote desktop services, directly on SBS Essentials or SBS Standard. Full stop. No exceptions. Is that okay? Now, if I want to have terminal services, which a lot of customers do with SBS, what must I do? One of my options is premium. Agreed? So the premium add-on gives us what?
Second license.
Second license for Windows 2008 or 2, plus SQL standard for small business. So is it always a premium add-on to do terminal services? The answer is no, because premium add-on only makes sense if they need SQL as well as the extra Windows license. Is that pretty much okay for all of us? So we do have the alternative of getting a Windows 2008 or 2 standard server and using that for remote desktop services. And that will integrate obviously with Essentials or with Standard. Another option that you might have, because sometimes unfortunately we're up against budget, is you could use Foundation for the terminal server, but only if it is a maximum of 15 users on the foundation. In other words, 15 users for remote desktop services. So be careful with that. I wouldn't recommend foundation. I would stay away from foundation. But if we were really hit badly with the budget, it's an option if we've got a very small number of users. So we've SBS Essentials. We have a 10-user network, and they want terminal services. They're looking at all kinds of ways to keep the cost down. Foundation could be the way to do that as one way. However, there is a big problem with foundation. What can you not do with foundation? You can't virtualize it. It doesn't include any virtualization rights. So in a lot of cases, if a customer is trying to put 2 servers onto one, 2 virtual onto a single, it ain't going to work because foundation doesn't give you any virtualization rights. So unless it's a very small solution, unless the customer absolutely understands the limitations of foundation, I would stay away from foundation. Is that okay? So I suppose the first thing is, if we talk about SBS 2011 Essentials versus Standard, Standard we're all familiar with. Everyone on the call and everyone here has been dealing with SBS, for a number of years. SBS 2011 Standard is 64-bit. SBS 2011 Standard includes Exchange Server 2010, includes SharePoint Foundation servers, includes Windows Server Update services, includes backup, includes monitoring, etc., etc. So is it a good fit for all customers? I don't think so. I think it's a good fit for probably somewhere around 30 to 50 users. In other words, if you're around 15 or 20 users, or even a little bit less, Essentials might make sense. But let me ask the question, if we're using Essentials, where do we get our email?
Cloud.
So cloud is one option, and one of the objectives we set, and hopefully everybody can see this now in a second, guys. You should be able to see me going on to Internet Explorer. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to look at Office 365. We don't care about Office 365 in this particular scenario, except to explain where SBS Essentials is. Is that okay? But I also want to use it as an opportunity to counter cloud, because some of us on the call, and I know some of us here have had customers asking about Google Apps or Office 365 versus an Exchange on-premise. So let's see if we can do that. And guys, what you might do is, if you're not going to ask a question, you might just mute on your end, just so we don't get feedback. Okay. Just ask you to mute. If you're not going to ask a question, you might just mute for me. That's fantastic. Thank you. So this is Office 365. Why are we looking at this? Because SBS Essentials on its own doesn't stack up. SBS Essentials on its own is really just a domain controller. SBS Essentials on its own is for 25 users, but it doesn't give us email, it doesn't give us SharePoint, it doesn't give us anything else except a login server. And I think where I'm going with this is, if, for example, this is a live environment, this is basically Office 365, and you can see I have a whole series of users here. And really what we're saying is that SBS Essentials has an add-in for Office 365 that allows you to create the users in SBS Essentials, not having to go to this web browser that I've just gone in. So where SBS Essentials is pitched, and again, for a lot of this is just, I want to know this so I can move on, is SBS Essentials is pitched at the customer that either already has their email or is looking to put their email somewhere else. I think all of us would agree that Exchange 2010 is a big product. Exchange 2010 for 5 users or 10 users on-premise does not make sense. And I think most of us would agree with that. If I've got 10 people, the last thing I want to do is hire someone for 2 days to fix Exchange if it goes wrong. So really what we're saying here is we have effectively Office 365, which combined with SBS Essentials gives you a complete solution. Now let me ask a question. Does it have to be Office 365 from Microsoft? The answer is no. However, with Office 365, it's an automatic connection. In other words, as soon as we set up Office 365 as an add-in to SBS Essentials, when I create a new user in SBS, guess what it does automatically? Creates the user in Exchange automatically in Office 365. Now, could I use Google Apps with this? Absolutely. Could I use some other kind of mail system? Absolutely. But the point about Essentials is it has a wizard connection to Office 365. It's designed primarily to have the email somewhere else. Are we all agreed on that? So I'm looking here, and always this is bad, guys, doing a live demonstration with your live email, just in case someone's given out to you. But this is Office 365. I'm using, in this case, Outlook Web Access to get to it, and it's a 25 gig mailbox. Those of us who remember the early versions of SBS remember the limit on SBS was 75 gigs for the whole company. The idea of Office 365 with Essentials is that each user has 25 gigs, and from a user point of view, the cost per user for email is £3 per user per month, or €4 per user per month. Now again, in this session, we're not covering off Office 365 in any great detail. We're using Exchange for Essentials. So again, guys, I might just be going into mute. And hopefully you didn't see me make a face there. But where I'm going with this is very simple. Competitors like Google Apps and even Dell Cloud offerings will be combined with things like SBS Essentials to give you a solution. My point is, particularly those of us who don't deal with a small business server, this will only grow. Larger organizations are looking at cloud. The largest organization that's on Office 365 at the moment has 32,000 users. So this is not for small business. Oh, you're very silent. Okay. Sebastian, is that any better?
Yes, it's fine, thank you.
Yes, sorry, I'll stay near the microphone here, just so you can hear me a little bit better. Apologies. So what I'm really saying, and the point that I was making is, this is an Office 365 mailbox. It's 25 gigs in size, and it's about €4. And its purpose in life is to be combined with something like SBS Essentials. That's really all I was saying with this particular segment. Now, I'm going to jump away from that, and I'm going to come back to looking at SBS itself. So what I'd like to do with that is take a quick look at SBS. So this is SBS Essentials. The install for SBS Essentials is approximately 45 minutes. So it's a much quicker install than for SBS 2011 standard. Now, what we're basically saying is SBS 2011 Essentials is a very quick install. It sets itself up as a domain controller, but the big deal, guys, is its backup is actually more advanced than SBS standard because it backs up all the client PCs as well. Right? So what's very interesting, if you've got a very small customer who needs good backups, I think most of us agree that there is limitations with the SBS backup. Yes? With SBS standard, one of the limitations is we can't use tape drives, correct? Mm-hmm. Now, it's true with Essentials that we can't use tape drives either. However, Essentials has a much better backup based, believe it or not, on home server, and it is designed to go out to all of the clients, up to 25 clients, and bring the backups and images locally for all of those clients. So for very small...
Sorry, this was news to me. You can't use tape. I mean, I feel stupid, but I mean, you can't use tape drive with SBS.
Well, that's a new thing. Yeah, you're absolutely. So a lot of people still thought you could use tape drives with SBS. You can use tape drives with SBS if you use third-party backup software like Backup Exec, for example.
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah.
However, the one thing where we got caught out before, and some of us on the call might remember this, is we got caught out using those Rev drives or those media caddies and trying to use it directly with SBS. It doesn't work. The only thing that the native backup with SBS recognizes is a USB hard drive. So just be very careful with that, whether it's essentials or whether it's standard. You should always have third-party software if you want to back up to anything other than USB. So I think that's...
Windows Hyper-V still doesn't recognize USB, right? So you can't back up the virtual machine.
Well, you can if the USB drive is on the physical host. So one of the things that we want to talk about in this session briefly is the virtualization of SBS. So now that you brought it up, let me throw it in there. If I want to virtualize SBS, as most of us in the room know, probably the best way to do it is to buy either the premium add-on and use that as the physical server. In other words, Windows Standard, turn on the Hyper-V role and away we go, right? Or buy a copy of Windows 2008 or 2 Standard OEM, put it on the box, and then put SBS as a virtual machine off it. That would allow me 2 virtual servers, the SBS and another server. If I'm doing that, as long as I do my backup on the physical server will recognize the USB drives, and we can still have a valid backup solution. So let me explain that again. Windows 2008 or 2 on the physical host, SBS is a virtual machine. We have a second virtual server running terminal services, yes, and we have the physical software to back up on the physical server, which recognizes the USB, and if it's Hyper-V aware, which Windows Backup is, or Symantec, what the agent is, then you've got a working solution. So that should work. So just to look at this, guys, this is our Essentials machine. Okay, and as you can see, it's been very nice, and it's warning me that I'm logged in as the administrator. Okay, and it's really difficult to manage. Here's my dashboard, and my dashboard is extremely basic, but allows me to add users, allows me to add servers, allows me to put up terminal services, etc., etc., etc. So, for example, here's my common tasks: get updates, set up the server backup, set up remote access, set up options for sharing, etc. And lo and behold, what we talked about a second ago, get started with Microsoft Office 365. The big thing I want to get across, and I'm going to move off on Essentials after this, is with Essentials, it's designed for third parties like Sophos, like Symantec, like Dell, like anyone, to actually put add-ins into the console that will allow it to actually extend the capability. So for example, and this isn't connected to the internet at the moment, but for example, it means that I can put an add-in in for Office 365 or an add-in for a particular backup and so on. So I think from my point of view, that's Essentials at the moment. So let me just jump back onto this, and hopefully everybody will get this on the screen now in a second. So talking about Windows Server 2008 or 2, and obviously Standard in this case, can I virtualize Essentials and Standard? Absolutely. Do I need Windows Server underneath? So let me ask this question to everybody. If I want to virtualize either Essentials or Standard, do I have to buy the premium add-on or a copy of Windows Standard to use Hyper-V with Windows Server SBS?
Yeah.
So some of us are saying yes, some of us are saying no. Anyone saying phone a friend? No?
You can virtualize it on DSX. I mean, you don't need to virtualize it on...
Okay, so the person who just said you can virtualize it on ESX, you're fired. Right? I'm only joking. You're absolutely right. You could virtualize it on the free version of ESX. That is perfectly valid because SBS has its own right to virtualize. So you could use ESXi. I would prefer that you used Hyper-V Server 2008 or 2, which is a free download from Microsoft. But you're absolutely right. You could use CitrixN, you could use VirtualBox, you could use ESXi, or you could use Hyper-V Server 2008 or 2. And I think that's very important when you're talking to a customer with a low budget. They could be a 50-user customer. They could be buying quite a bit of kit from you, but they want to virtualize SBS without buying another Windows license. You can do that by using Hyper-V Server 2008 or 2, and it's certainly valid. Okay, so a couple of things. If we talk about things like user management and identity and connecting clients, both SBS Standard and SBS Essentials have a very simple client connection wizard that connects the client, installs everything from an SBS point of view. Fantastic. But what I think is very interesting is with Essentials we have the option to do a wake on LAN. So it's possible to put an add-in in that will actually wake a client up on LAN. And that's being used in a lot of different scenarios where there's a remote site or a remote session. Is that okay? Now, remote web access. So have any of us heard of remote web access in SBS? Do I need terminal services for remote web access? And the answer is no. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you have a two administrator rights or something, isn't it?
Yeah, you're on the right track. In other words, we do have administrative access, which is fine. So I can always use terminal services to get to the server. But much more interestingly, we have what's called remote web access. And what does that mean? That means that I can get to any of my desktops from anywhere to manage those individual desktops or get to the server. Now, what does that mean? If I have two people that are on the road all the time and they're bringing iPads with them on the road, or Dell Streaks I should say, but they're bringing some kind of tablet with them, do they need terminal services to get back to their desktop? And the answer is no. If their desktop is staying in the office, they can use Remote Web Workplace to go straight to their desktop. Now, the advantage is there's no cost. There's no terminal services licenses. There's no extra server. So I'll give you an example. There's 3 sales guys that have a desktop in the office with a 20-inch screen when they're in the office. Those guys, when they're out and about, are using an iPad or a tablet or an Android device or whatever it is. Those guys can use remote web access on a web page to get straight into their desktop. They can use it to get straight into SBS if they're the administrator. It's a very simple capability, but I think you'll have to agree with me, it's not in Windows Standard. It's only in SBS. And I think that's very important. Where we need to go to terminal services is if we have 6 people who bring their laptop with them and their desktop isn't in the office, that's where terminal services comes in. Is that a fair point? But for a lot of the solutions, this makes sense. So there's obviously health monitoring included with SBS, as you'd expect. Storage is based on the Windows Server 2008 or 2 storage system, which is great. Single file restore, bare metal restore, that's all built into SBS as we have expected. As I say, which is quite surprising, the Essentials backup is actually stronger than the standard backup. What's the maximum number of users on SBS Standard? 75, and it's always been 75, and it ain't going to change. The maximum we really recommend putting on SBS Standard is 50 or 55, simply because there is no, I repeat, no transition pack. 5 years ago, there was a transition pack from SBS to full product where you could unlock it. We don't have it anymore. So what tends to happen when someone is sold SBS and they shouldn't? P45. In other words, when you're very close to the 75 threshold, you really want the customer to tell you that's too close. Okay? So a couple of things. Yeah.
If someone's buying a brand new version of SBS and they have 50 users, you're better off putting it low, low.
I think if they're already at 50 users and growing, I would be trying to position full product at that stage. And that might be, for example, Windows Server Standard or Enterprise to give them virtualization and running Exchange either on-premise or in the cloud. But I think when you're at 50 users and growing, you're already a bit high for SBS. Now, a couple of things talking about that, and just to move off these lovely slides. So I think we talked about, so I want to stay on Standard and the premium add-on. So if I talk about SBS Standard, a couple of myths that we said we wanted to explode. Let me ask a couple of questions and see if these resonate. How many domain controllers can I have in an SBS standard domain?
One.
So a lot of people will say one. In other words, or two. Okay, any advance on two? So I think let's make sure we're all on the same page, which I'm sure we are. A domain controller is obviously a login server. An Active Directory domain controller is what I'm talking about. And obviously, if we don't know that, we shouldn't be on the call. Sorry, that's very bold. But my point is, the login server, domain controller, the perception is we're only allowed one SBS server per network. Are we all agreed on that?
Yeah.
That perception is correct. There is only one SBS 2011 server allowed in your entire network. However, you can have as many domain controllers as you like. So I do have a customer that has SBS, as it happens, SBS 2008, not 2011, with 5 offices, and he has 4 Windows 2008 standards, one in each office, running as a domain controller. And that is absolutely valid. So just to be clear for everyone on the call, I can only have one SBS server in the entire network, but I can have additional domain controllers running Windows 2008 or 2 standard. Is that okay?
On the same network.
On the same network.
So the SBS does not have to be the domain controller.
So SBS does have to be the primary domain controller, but additional domain controllers can be running on Windows 2000 or have to be running on Windows 2000 or 2 standard or enterprise. Now I think that's very important because sometimes the blocker for us is the cost of Exchange. And SBS is still the most cost-effective way to get Exchange as long as the users are not over 75.
I just don't see the point of having a separate domain controller because
Okay.
SBS is a domain controller. That fails, then SBS is fine, domain is fine.
So that's a very good point, guys, and for everyone on the call, Sean just mentioned he doesn't see the point in having an additional domain controller because SBS has the Exchange server and everything else, and okay, you can still log in, but you're not going to be able to do very much. And that's not a bad point. Let me see if we can look at that for a second. So what I want to do is I want to jump away and hopefully what I'll be able to do, let me just admit someone else, and I should be able to share a whiteboard, and hopefully we can look at these issues from a whiteboard. So let me just see if that pops up for everybody. Just give it a couple of seconds, guys. You'll probably get a black screen, and we should get our little whiteboard. And that whiteboard should be up for everybody now in a second. So I feel like doing green today for some reason. So the first thing is we've got our SBS network. We've got our SBS server. As you can see, I've done great handwriting. But the question was, why have an additional domain controller? Well, if we have an additional domain controller running Windows 2008 or 2, we potentially could be running file serving on this as well as domain. So Sean's point is valid. If the SBS server goes down, we've lost our email. However, we haven't lost our login capability and we haven't lost our files. So in some ways, that's a reasonable disaster recovery for some of our capability. Going a little bit further, if this was a separate office, by only having the SBS server on its own, all the login traffic has to go right back to the office. Guys, in most countries, and I'm sure it's the same for everybody on the call, we don't always have great bandwidth everywhere. So if we can have logins handled locally, that means we've more bandwidth for things that make money. So for me, having a Windows 2008 or 2 standard in the Dublin office, because my SBS server is in the Cork office, can make huge sense. Now again, this is something a lot of us miss, that SBS is not about a single box solution. Remember, it's up to 75 users. If I'm 50 users, there's a good chance I might have 2 or 3 locations. With those 2 or 3 locations, Windows 2008 or 2 can go into each location as a domain controller. But not only that, guys, we can actually run a second Exchange server. So I have a customer who wants failover on their Exchange, who wants the ability to have the data in 2 places. They have Exchange sitting on the second Windows 2008 or 2 standard. They don't have to buy additional client licenses because they have those already with SBS. And they're using a DAG, a database availability group, between the 2 Exchange servers. They don't have to have the premium add-on, because for this scenario, I could just buy Windows 2008 or 2 standard. Now, the only reason to buy the premium add-on, guys, is it gives you a bundle of Windows 2008 or 2 standard plus SQL. But you're paying for that SQL in that bundle. So if you don't need SQL to do this solution, let's say there's a third office down here. That third office can also have Windows 2008 or 2 standard. So we have Windows 2008 or 2 standard giving us AD and some local file share. AD, local file share and Exchange. Exchange up here.
You need to buy another Exchange license, don't you?
You will need to buy an Exchange standard license, which is about €600 or 600 sterling, but you won't need to buy Exchange CALs because you already have the CALs as part of your SBS. Now, the Exchange piece, I admit, is unique and unusual, but I'm only trying to illustrate that SBS limits are not what we think they are. Everyone assumes you can only have one SBS server. That is correct, but that doesn't mean I can't have additional domain controllers, additional file controllers. There's no limit on the number of servers I can add to an SBS network. I had a customer about 3 years ago that had 15 servers connected to his SBS network.
Is it right to best practice to leave the domain controller actually off the SBS?
So you can't take, well, deployment-wise, you can't. The one thing SBS won't allow you to do, guys, and watch out for this when customers are asking you this question, you can't take Exchange off the SBS server, and you can't take the domain controller role off the SBS server. In other words, Microsoft have designed the SBS standard to have everything on it. You can't take it off. But that's not to say you can't complement it. Or it's not to say, you know, if a customer has SBS 2008 and are fed up with Exchange, they can't pause the Exchange and use their Exchange from somewhere else, as in Office 365. But my point, I suppose, is, although we're moving to cloud all the time, although potentially we're moving away from bundles like SBS, SBS 2011 standard does maximize at 75 users, but it can have as many servers as you require. So a customer comes along and says, I have 2 offices, one in Dublin, one in Cork, and I want to have a cost-effective solution, and there's 50 users. Your first question is, will you grow above 75? No. We're not going to grow above 75, well then potentially SBS standard is a solution. Microsoft often say SBS is not a branch office solution. What they mean by that is it can't be a branch of another network. But if SBS is in charge of the whole network, then you can have as many branches as you like, as many Windows standards as you like. Admittedly, you can only buy one premium add-on, but if you don't need SQL, you don't have to buy the premium add-on to have 2 server or 3 server solutions. Is that reasonable from that point of view? Now, let's talk about when SBS is not enough, guys, because I appreciate there's quite a lot of us that have come in here, and SBS is not our primary focus. So I think it's clear for everybody in the room and online that anything that's close to 75 users is not appropriate for SBS. Is that okay for everybody? Okay. Also, If you have more than one domain, SBS is not appropriate. So for example, we have Dell.com and we decide we also need Dell.ie. In that case, SBS is not appropriate. It can only have one domain. So if there's a need for the business to have more than one domain or to set up a trust relationship with another domain, that knocks SBS out. So 75 users, SBS no good. Multiple domains in the organization, SBS no good. Trust relationship required in the organization, SBS no good. Is that okay? Mm-hmm. So what I'm always asking when someone says about SBS is, do you have an existing network? Yes. Is this going to be part of the existing network, or is it going to be separate? If it has to be separate and trusted, SBS is not appropriate. Is that okay? So what I'm really saying here very simply is SBS is not enough in those scenarios. Now, what's the next level up? Well, obviously, from our point of view, we're really talking about standard and enterprise. Agreed?
Yep.
From that perspective. Now, let me open up the mic first to the room. I'm just going to ask, has anyone got any questions at this stage? And then, obviously, everyone online, I'll give you a chance if there's any questions. So, guys in the room, any questions?
Yes, Mark.
Okay, go ahead.
On the essentials part, if the add-on premium, what about the cans?
Okay, good point. So that's a very good point. If we talk about essentials, there's no cows for essentials. We're all agreed. If we get the premium add-on has the notion of cows. So let me give you a scenario. Let me give everybody a scenario and ask the question. Oh yeah, apologies. Let me repeat the question. The question was, with SBS Essentials, if I buy the premium add-on, what's the story with the cows? Right. So first and foremost, premium add-on has cows based on SQL usage. End of story. What I mean by that is, if you're buying the premium add-on just to get a second server and maybe use SQL in the future, you don't need any premium add-on cows. However, if you turn around to me and say there will be 10 people using SQL from day one, you will have your SBS Essentials plus your premium add-on plus 10 premium add-on cows in total. Make sense? So the only reason for a premium add-on cow is not to access that second Windows Server license, is to access the SQL.
Is it cheaper than SQL now?
Overall, it is cheaper than buying SQL Standard and buying individual cows. Because the premium add-on, anyone remember what the premium add-on is on the price list? Is it about 1,100? 1,500, something like that. And then the cows themselves, for a bunch of 5, are a couple of hundred. I think they're not cheap. They're about 70 quid a pop. That's still cheaper than buying SQL Standard, plus the cows, plus a copy of Windows Server. But the point I want to make is the premium add-on only makes sense in reality if you're going to buy SQL. Is that okay? Okay, so from that point of view, we said we'd give 5 to 10 minutes to questions. Do we have any more questions, guys?
No.
Yeah, one more short question about the number of domains.
Yeah, number of domains question. Go ahead.
Yes, what about the subdomain?
Oh, subdomain. So the idea of a subdomain, for example, would be if you had Dell.com, you might create irl.dell.com or uk.dell.com or europe.dell.com like we have here. The answer is you cannot do that with SBS, any flavor of SBS. Believe it or not, what happens with SBS, if we set up a trust relationship, within 16 days, SBS will start to fall over. So SBS does allow you to set up a trust relationship with another domain, purely for the purposes of migrating. But you've got approximately 16 to 32 days, and after 16 to 32 days, it will break the trust and it will start to fail over. It'll start to fail. It'll actually shut itself off. Okay? Here's a good question before everybody falls asleep and gets totally bored, if that's not already happened. What's the maximum amount of email storage that SBS 2011 standard can handle? Because we know SBS 2003 and 2008, well, certainly 2003 was 75 gigs. What's SBS 2011? How much email can it handle? So, in reality, it's as much as you want to. SBS 2011 has what version of Exchange? 2010, and it's 2010 Service Pack 1, and it is recommended not to exceed 3 terabytes per storage unit, and you get 5 mailbox storage areas. So in reality, the recommendation is you shouldn't store more than 10 terabytes of email on an SBS 2010 server. So from that point of view, we don't have an issue. Is that okay?
Mark?
Yep.
Hi, this is Vijay. We got some technical problem and got disconnected. So can you please accept the link invitation?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Thanks.
Perfect. You should be back looking at my scribble. So let me just... What I'm going to do, guys, is we're about 5 minutes towards the end. Let me just make sure that everybody can see the PowerPoint. I'll just share the desktop again. So everybody should have this. And I kind of want to conclude this. Just go down. Okay. So I think we've covered off on the online. Again, the big thing here is that when we talk about Office 365 and SBS, it gives a single sign-on. That's the big deal. The add-ins relating to SBS Essentials, they don't work with Standard. They're only with SBS Essentials. So from a Microsoft point of view, we're moving forward strongly with Essentials as for very small business. I think SBS Standard, we said there's certain scenarios where it makes a lot of sense. Premium add-in, I think we're all covered on that, guys. It only makes sense if there's SQL included. And I suppose I'm going to finish off with system requirements. Believe it or not, the minimum system requirements for Essentials is 2 gigs of RAM. Does anyone believe that? No. And I wouldn't send an Essentials out the door with less than 8 gigs of RAM. Okay? It's running Windows Server. It's running Active Directory, it's running client backup and everything else. So 8 gigs of RAM is the minimum you should send Essentials out the door. SBS Standard, minimum amount of RAM that you should use on SBS Standard. I think 10 or 12 gigs is probably the minimum. I tend to stay at 16 gigs if I can. And if it's going to be virtualized, the physical server it's going on should have at least 24 gigs of RAM. Is that okay? Remember, when we talk about SBS Standard, it's a 64-bit server with Exchange 2010, with SharePoint running, with a SQL instance running, with monitoring running, with health and monitoring running. There's an awful lot of processes running here. So minimum guys is for marketing. For us, Essentials 8 gigs, absolute minimum. SBS Standard should, in most cases, have 2 procs. And should have at least 16 gigs to play with. Exchange itself, the minimum for Exchange 2010 Standard is 12 gigs. So 16 gigs is an absolute minimum. So I'm going to stop the presentation at that point. I'm going to first ask if anyone in the room has a question, and then I'm going to put it online as well. So guys, any questions? No? Reasonable. So when we get those questions filled out online, we'll have no problem filling them out. Correct? No. So anyone online, do we have a question from anyone online? Well, in that case, what I'm going to do is thank everybody for joining. I think he is asking something there. I'll get him after the thing. I'm going to thank everybody for joining. I appreciate this was our pilot, and we probably need a little bit better network connectivity. for future. Thank you very much for joining. So guys, thank you very much. As I say, it was just a pilot. We will be able to improve it with better network connectivity. Unfortunately, I was stuck on a wireless connection. So the next time we'll do this, we'll do it wireless, or we'll do it wired. So thank you very much.